بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is Anwar. We're recording today with our Dawah Discourse program, inshaAllah ta'ala. Dawah Discourses, of course, are these conversations that we're having, discussions around topics that are related to da'wah. Da'wah, of course, is inviting, it is demonstrating, it is teaching people about Islam. Today's topic, however, is going to be a little bit different. Today's topic is about da'wah through listening. And we're specifically mentioning active listening. Listening, not just, listening to be able to respond, etc., but actually genuinely showing interest, coming with like a pure intention that you actually want to hear the other person out. Now, when applying this in a da'wah context, this might seem a little strange. That is because usually when we think of da'wah, we think of a person giving a lecture, giving a talk, right? Sharing Islam. So basically people usually, when we think of da'wah, we think of the person is here, the other person is over here, and you're just basically giving them this long, spiel about why Islam is the truth, why the person is misguided, etc. And today, we want to kind of rewind this idea and actually show how this idea is kind of false for numerous reasons. And we will, inshaAllah ta'ala, go through like a list of reasons why this, inshaAllah ta'ala, is a superior da'wah method to almost anything else that the person can do. Number one, active listening as a technique is actually a very good technique. And it's a technique that even our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ applied. We know that the Prophet himself ﷺ used to listen to almost anybody who came to him with a concern, with a complaint, or even anybody who wanted to talk to him. People used to go to his house and eat from his food and talk to him and whatnot. People used to go and complain, people used to go and ask questions, etc. Of course, people were respectful of his time, knowing his status, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, but that was something that they did. In fact, for a moment in Islam, it was required that before people wanted to consult with the Prophet, they had to pay some charity, some sadaqah. Now, of course, this was abrogated, and in some narrations it mentions it was abrogated within hours, meaning it was actually never taken into effect. But this was to tell people that, look, time is money, in essence, and in this case. And if you want that consultation, you have to pay a consulting fee if you want to talk to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, of course, this was abrogated, like we said. It was not required, and people were still doing this. But the verse that mentions this is still in the Quran. And on top of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds the believers that this used to be the case and now it is not. But it is still recommended that you pay some charity. It is still recommended that you repent before you meet the Prophet. It is still recommended they do all these other things that the verse in Surah Al-Mujadala mentions. This is in Surah Al-Mujadala. The hypocrites, they used to mock the Prophet by saying, they used to say, he is an ear. Literally, they would say that the Prophet ﷺ is an ear. Meaning, why were they saying that he's an ear? Because they thought that he believed anybody who came to him. Okay? So they would come, they would make up an excuse for why they didn't do this, why they didn't do this, etc., etc. And they assumed that the Prophet ﷺ, because of his superior listening skills, okay, that he was actually believing them. And in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defends the Prophet ﷺ, where he says, "Huwa udhunu khayrin lakum." Okay, he is an ear of good, an ear of truth. He believes the believers. He's not, basically a fool that he's just going to believe everything. But because of his manners, because of his etiquette, you assume that he's actually believing it. This isn't a bad thing, by the way. This isn't being two-faced. This isn't being duplicitous. Just because I don't believe you doesn't mean that I'm not going to show respect. Just because I don't believe you doesn't mean I'm going to mock you or actually descend to your level. This is actually showing the superior etiquette of Islam. Many times we get people that come with fraudulent news, complete, outright lies. But we still remain respectful. We still, maintain our own mannerisms and etiquette. And this is what the Prophet himself ﷺ did. Now for the Prophet, when he would listen to people, when he would talk to them, when he would counsel them, etc. We're applying the same technique because he applied it in da'wah. What does it mean for us to apply it in da'wah? A person comes to us, and this person has, let's say, a concern, let's say a question, right? There's a story that happened to me where a person emailed the masjid, and he was upset, he was very angry, he demanded answers to questions that he had, and he wanted to meet with somebody who could answer them. I told him, yeah, that's fine, I can meet with you. This was a few years back. I don't mind, I can meet with you. Would you be able to come to the masjid? The person said, no, the masjid is not safe. I don't feel comfortable coming to your mosque. Can we meet in a third place, third party place? Can we go to a coffee shop? I said, coffee shop is perfect. Let's go have a cup of coffee. So that's actually what we ended up doing. We met at a coffee shop. The person had printed out a list that said the top 10 most difficult questions for a Muslim. Okay, extremely difficult questions. And the average Muslim might not be able to answer them. In fact, the average Muslim might not even realize that these are issues. Okay, and this is obviously because of a few different things. You know what I mean? They're not issues because obviously they actually aren't. But as is the case, there are some non-Muslims out there who like to make a big deal out of certain things. So this person had printed them out. He said, okay, so I'm going to ask you the questions on this list. Is that fine? I said, yeah, sure, fine, go ahead. He asked the first question. Okay, I think it was about the age of Aisha radiallahu anha when she got married to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I said, not a problem. Instead of answering the question outright, it is always ideal to meet the person, talk to them, find out who they are, right? And so in this case, while I'm answering, you know what I mean? It's not that I had no intention on answering. I told him, okay, let's, before we go into the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, there are certain things about Islam that are very important to understand in order for this issue to be put into context. Does that make sense? Yes. Obviously, as Muslims, we believe in God. What is your belief? Do you believe in God? That one question spurred an entire conversation with the individual. And I asked him more questions about himself. He told me a little bit about his background. He was a science researcher at the university, and that for the longest time he was an atheist. But now he's realizing that science itself has limitations. Okay, which in the philosophy of science, if you look at the philosophy behind science, it shows you that science is great. Science answers so many questions for us. We need science. In fact, Islam encourages it. But Islam, and obviously science itself, the philosophy behind science, will tell you that science does not have the answers to everything. There are a lot of things that are beyond science. Super-rational, supra-rational, metaphysical, etc. Things that are in the realm of logic. Mathematics, for example, is not science, it's actually logic. Logic is beyond the realm of science. And so these types of things, he was realizing that he thought in the beginning that science would go hand in hand with atheism, and he's realizing that there are a lot of limitations, there are a lot of questions still, etc. So we had a really good conversation. Majority of the time, I'm actually just listening. And that's actually kind of the lesson that I wanted to impart on everybody today. That one of the best da'wah mechanisms is for us to merely be better listeners, just like the Prophet ﷺ was. What does it mean to be a better listener? It means to be present. Presence is where you're fully there. Meaning you're not like on your phone, you're not like, while you're like, yeah, I'm listening to you and you're over here texting. No, that's not what listening is. Listening is being present, fully giving your attention to that individual. Do we have traditions that actually say this? Yes, we do. The Prophet himself, ﷺ, it is narrated in multiple ahadith by the Sahaba themselves where they said that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he would listen to somebody, he would turn with his full body and face the individual that he was talking to and that he was listening to. Meaning he would never listen to a person like sideways. So imagine, if you're the person over here and I'm listening to you, but I'm over here, I'm just kind of like staring off into the distance, that won't make any sense. Most of us would feel disrespected by this because I'm not even listening to you full on. But the Prophet ﷺ, and people do this, by the way, out of a sense of arrogance or to show like, you're not even that important to me for me to fully listen to you. But the Prophet ﷺ was the exact opposite of this. He was showing us that by him being true to his ideals, he actually demonstrates that he's a superior being. Meaning that we ourselves, as Muslims, are the best because we are the best, not because we have to put anyone else down. There are many people, unfortunately, politicians, businessmen, etc., whatever, that they try to put people down by calling them names, put people down by not even paying attention to them, pretending that they don't even know them, etc., etc., all these other things. These are all fools' ways of demonstrating power, when in fact, true power is by the individual showing that they actually are respectable themselves. I am respectable because that's the right thing to do, and when I do the right thing, Allah actually elevates me. And true power can only come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anyways. This is why a lot of these people, when they think that they're exuding power, in fact, and they're just showing how weak they really are. And their weakness actually shows. So, going back to this, the Prophet ﷺ would turn and be present with the individual, give him his full attention, would listen. And like we said, the hypocrites, they thought that they were mocking the Prophet ﷺ, where in fact, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala came to his defense and revealed verses that say that he's actually good, he's actually listening to you. This is actually something good we need to do more of. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions different types of listening, right? Where he mentions not only hearing, but actually actively listening. And we know that there's a big difference between hearing somebody and actually listening. Listening also entails like, what are they actually saying? How are they saying it? So I know what they're saying these words, but when I listen to a person's tone, when I analyze their body language, when I look at their facial features, and this is why texting itself can be very limiting. Texting itself sometimes can be very problematic, and a lot of times the actual message that you want to get across does not come across through texting and through like instant messaging. This is why we would prefer anytime that if we can do something over like voice, over a phone call, that's better. And if we can do something in person, that's even better. Why? Because you can see a person's facial expression, you can see their body language, you can see so many other things. There's visual cues. There's also tone cues. The way you say something perhaps is more important than what you're saying. And a lot of times these can't be conveyed. Now in da'wah, what we're talking about here in active listening, I'm paying attention to all of these things. I can tell when a person is disturbed by something. I can tell what's important to somebody. I can tell what kind of state they're going through. A lot of times if a person is asking, so let's say you're a Muslim. Obviously, inshallah ta'ala, all of you are. You have a non-Muslim coworker. If they're asking you a lot of questions about Islam, pay attention to what they're actually saying and how they're saying it. Why? Because a lot of times it actually might show that they're interested in Islam, not just out of curiosity, but because Islam can offer something for them that they know, but they want you to help them kind of demonstrate it. They might be going through some sort of personal crisis. They might be going through some sort of, family issue. They might be faith crisis, spirituality crisis, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be a crisis. It can be a problem, questions of the spiritual nature, questions of existential nature, why am I here, what am I doing, etc. All these important questions. So you have to pay attention. And paying attention means that you're actually listening. Listening is so important because when somebody listens to us, many researchers have talked about this, the psychology of listening is so key. It actually starts at a very early age. Babies cry. This is one of the theories out there that has been observed. Babies cry sometimes merely to be listened to. The baby just wants to be listened to, meaning the baby just wants somebody to be there to acknowledge that I'm also here. Meaning when we're listened to, this is acknowledgement that I exist. And the baby is still formulating that idea that I am something and I exist. And it's such a profound idea, right? This is why it's so important for us to be listened to. And so if you, as a good Muslim, can listen to somebody Wallahi, you've done 90% of the work. 90% of the work is done when you listen to somebody. Because one of the most fundamental things is that you're acknowledging that that is a person and they're worthy of your time and they're worthy of being listened to. That's why listening is so important. This is why listening is so comforting for some people. Like some people, and obviously this is why having a spouse is one of the most important things for a human being. Now I'm not saying that, you know what I mean, if you don't have a spouse, you're not important, etc. No, I'm not saying this. We're encouraging, inshallah ta'ala, everybody to find a spouse, inshallah ta'ala. As spouses, one of the most fundamental things that we do for each other is that we listen to the other spouse. That's it. A lot of times we don't even have to offer advice. We don't have to offer a fix. A lot of husbands fall into this trap, by the way, of thinking that every time the wife complains, or we interpret it as complaining, when in fact she's not, she's just talking about her day. It sounds like complaining, but in fact it's not. She just wants an acknowledgement that you've listened, that she exists, that she's important. That's it. And it's so profound. And this is why, if you look at the Prophet ﷺ and the way that he was with his wives, he's demonstrating this to an utmost degree. He's listening to them, he's talking to them. He found comfort in Khadija, he found comfort in Aisha, he found comfort in so many of his wives. And the wives found comfort in him, right? Just merely going there and talking to him. And he's just listening. And that's completely fine. That's all he needs to do is listen. So as a piece of advice for all the husbands out there, sometimes all you need to do is listen. You don't even need to talk back and you're like, that's, you know, acknowledge it, you know what I mean? Encourage her, you know what I mean, comfort her, etc. That's all you need to do. You don't need to fix her problem for her. So, listening has such a profound effect. Now, in da'wah, one of the best things that we can do is, like I said, listen. And listen attentively. And the thing is, I'm saying listening here, not... So, a person might think, okay, yeah, I'll listen in order to respond. I'll listen in order to know how to talk back to the individual. This is very limiting in nature, and I would not recommend it either. Because a lot of times they'll know this, and then it becomes argumentative and you're no longer listening. Listen until they're done listening, until the person is done talking, until there's no more listening that you can do. Take it to the extreme. Okay? Acknowledge. A lot of times you can mirror their statements back. Repeat things back to the individual if you want them to elaborate on certain things. So going back to the individual that I was talking to, I spent a lot of the time listening to him. We actually never covered a lot about Aisha radiallahu anha. We talked a little bit about Islam, a little bit about Tawheed, a little bit about La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, these types of things. And then we mentioned, very briefly, just touching upon, marriage and how common it was and how the age of marriage, has changed, etc., etc. How common it was even here in America for people to marry at a young age. These types of things is like, okay, yeah. Non-combative, non-fighting. Now, if I had started from the very beginning to get into the technical details of the age of marriage for Aisha radiallahu anha, we would have had a back and forth. It would have been a debate, it would have been an argument, it would have been very combative. But in listening, you humanize not only yourself, but you humanize the person that you're listening to, and they feel appreciated, they feel human. And it actually diffuses them. If they came there so the person when he came, he was very defensive, I could sense that he wanted to be argumentative. He was no longer argumentative. Then he said, okay, question number 2, and he asked the question, right? Slavery in Islam. Same thing. I started listening to him. I asked him questions. You know what I mean? About his life, about where he was, his family background, etc., etc. And he talked for a while and we had a discussion. Now, I wasn't dodging the question. We still actually addressed the question, but we addressed it in a very casual way, conversational way, to where we were appreciating the individual. But by applying these ideas of listening to the people, listening to the individual that we're talking to, wallah, we can get so much more across. It's no longer something that is just going there and giving a lecture. And I want us to kind of move away from that mode of da'wah. Now, here's the thing. A lot of people might like that mode of da'wah, meaning I just go there, here it is, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, here's Islam, Islam is the best, you know what I mean, are you ready to take your shahada? People like that maybe because it's quicker, it's more efficient, but even the people who promote that, I know personally, they will tell you, you have to listen to the individual. You have to actually hear them out. Another benefit of hearing them out is identifying what's important to this person. What's the background of this person? I can't give da'wah to somebody I know nothing about. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ himself, almost every time he gave da'wah, he knew exactly who he was talking to. He knew a lot about them. In fact, in one narration, he's talking to an individual. He says, أَنَا أَعْلَمُ بِدِينِكَ مِنْكَ, I know your religion more than you do. Now he's talking to a person who has his own religion, and he's saying, I know your religion better than you do. Now in the course of the conversation, he's not starting off by this, but he's actually correcting something about the individual. He's showing how you're not even practicing your own religion properly because you know that your own religion is false. Basically, that's what the Prophet was telling the person. But he's knowing the individual. For us, we don't know the people that we're talking to beforehand necessarily. Unless we do, then that's great. But take the time to get to know them. Ask them about their own religion. Ask them about their views. Ask them about what it is that they do in their life, etc. What's important to them. Once you know those things, it'll be very easy to cater your da'wah to the things that they actually said. If somebody said, yeah, family is very important to me. My career is very important to me. This is very important to me. That is very important to me. Whatever it is, over the course now, they won't actually say it like that. What they'll do is they'll identify things that are important to them over the course of the conversation, and then you can introduce it from that point of view. That's actually very important for us to do. By the way, you can do that. Like, active listening is not just meant for da'wah. Like I said, for spouses, any type of relationship that you have. Imagine if a boss has employees and he's listening to his employees. How appreciated the employees will be, and how much more likely they will be to do the things that the boss actually asks them to do. Okay? Active listening is a talent and a skill that we can develop that I think everybody should develop. And we can do it in our own nasiha sessions. So if I want to give advice, nasiha, right? Nasiha is one of the most important things, and perhaps next time we'll talk about more about how nasiha, the overlap between nasiha and da'wah. Nasiha has so many etiquettes and so many profound things, but it has to start with listening. A lot of times we think that giving nasiha is just that. I just go there, I'm going to give you the information, you like it, you don't, I don't care, here it is. And then a person walks away. That's not giving good advice. If you look at the Prophet ﷺ, the way that he gave advice, it was completely opposite of this. He actually listened. He would ask people questions before he's making assumptions, clarifying, hey, I heard this. Is this what's going on? Talk to me. You know what I mean? And people will open up. That's what we have to do. So in our da'wah, we have to do the same thing. Plus, over the course of that, you'll find if the person genuinely is interested, if you just have questions, whatever it is, but you'll be able to have a better conversation. With that individual, I use this example a lot, but it was a profound experience. Because that same individual, we did not get to question number 3. Those 2 questions took us an hour to get through. Complete hour. And then after this, he was like, okay, I'll think about a lot of this. Second time we got together, he messaged me, we got together. He took his shahada, alhamdulillah. He became Muslim. And he ripped up the paper in front of me. He said, I don't need this. I know these are just, whatever. They're litmus tests. In reality, and we know that. And as Muslims and people who give a lot of da'wah, we know that a lot of these questions that are supposedly out there, difficult questions, are just meant to either stump an individual but they're not actually at the core of the faith. The core of the faith is what attracts people to Islam. And the core of the faith has withstood all of this. It's withstood all of this. Going back to active listening. In active listening, right, we show empathy, care. People want to know that you actually care about them. They don't want just a religion that's devoid of any human value or human connection. And when you listen to an individual, they feel that connection that you have. There are so many people who accepted Islam because of the personality and the warmth of the Prophet ﷺ, where they said, man, when I met him, it was like, I knew him, he was warm, he was kind to me, I love him, etc., etc., all these other things. This is because he took the care, ﷺ, to actually pay attention to them, to listen to them, and this is something that we have to do. Active listening is crucial, inshallah ta'ala, to our da'wah. And like I said, you'll find out about the background. So, through active listening, another benefit, is that I can find out, okay, the person is Christian, the person is an atheist, the person is agnostic, the person is spiritual, the person is this, the person is that. And they'll tell you what, if they have issues with their own religion, what those issues are. A lot of times people will tell you, I grew up, in this faith, and, I just felt, this and this and this and this. And you can demonstrate very easily now that person has told you what they didn't like about their own faith and what they're open to, and you can come in and talk to them about Islam. It's not a problem whatsoever. A lot of times, we don't even have to give da'wah in that sense. Meaning, if you just apply that active listening, that care, that empathy, that love for a fellow human being, that's all you need to do. The person does not have to accept Islam for it to be successful. The person can remain a Christian, whatever they want to remain. But they'll completely change their outlook on you as a person and Islam as a religion. Even if you barely defend Islam, say the conversation is about, a different thing. By you just merely being there and listening to them, you've done your job, inshaAllah ta'ala. Because they feel important, they feel great. Well, I can't tell you how many times people have come into the office, talked to me for like a half hour, and they spent 90% of the time talking, and I'm talking maybe 10%. And then they're like, Sheikh, Jazakallah khair, that was a great, conversation, I benefited so much, etc., and they left. And then in the back of my mind, I'm laughing because I know I barely got in just a few words. But because I know that they felt appreciated, they felt that I listened to them, etc. And this is so important. And I'm imploring, inshallah ta'ala, everybody to be better active listeners. There is a book that I would recommend. I have the physical book, and I also listened to it in an audio book because I was driving at the time when I got it a lot. It is called The Lost Art of Listening. It's called The Lost Art of Listening, and it has amazing points. Like I said, even within our Islamic tradition, our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the best example of a person who employed these techniques. This book is beneficial because obviously it goes into the psychology behind it, and it breaks it down, etc. Where the Prophet ﷺ is merely teaching us through example. He's teaching us by himself, employing it. And obviously many of the Sahaba understanding that and emulating it as well. And I'm saying this so that we can employ both, inshallah ta'ala. It's not that I'm recommending the book over the sunnah, no. And I don't recommend, I'm not telling you you don't need the sunnah and don't study the science behind it. No, we need both. We can study the science behind it, which is what this individual did. He's a psychologist, and he studied the science behind listening and why it's important. And of course we have it that it's already recommended in our religion. This is of course one of the millions of reasons why I believe Islam is the best. Wallahi, we're so fortunate to have Islam as our religion. Islam is the best, wallahi, for so many reasons. For this whole idea of the compatibility between science and faith is something that Islam has, and most other faiths are still reconciling, and they have a problem with. Because Islam understands the philosophy. As Muslims, we understand the philosophy behind science. We understand science, what it does and what it doesn't do. In fact, Muslims were the ones who pioneered science as a method. It's just a method. Experimentation, hypothesizing, theorizing, etc., making observations, all these other things. And this is why Islam always offers us good advice. Islam offers us good guidelines on how to behave, inshallah ta'ala. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He helps us and guides us to be better people in giving da'wah, to be better listeners, inshallah ta'ala, and to be among those who are able to do the best in whatever circumstances that they have. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanakallah wa hamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.